Welcome everyone to this session about careers in sustainability, part of the PRME conference hosted by Rutgers Business School, October 2020. So I would like to acknowledge our panelists for this conversation. In this conversation, we're going to be speaking with Michael Bzdak and Eban Goodstein. We're also waiting for a third panelist that will be joining us soon. The objective of this panel is to have conversation with you. Oh, here, Lax, wonderful. I saw Lax coming in. If you can provide him access to join us. We're going to be discussing with our panelists today about, wonderful, welcome, we are complete. We're going to be discussing with our panelists about careers in sustainability. We want to learn from their career paths and how they got to their positions. We're also very curious to get advice from them regarding careers in sustainability. And let's also talk a little bit about how has this crazy year of 2020 impacted careers in this space, etc. So that being said, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to be moderating the panel and asking our panelists a number of questions to get the conversation started. I also welcome very, very much your questions. Please make them known in the chat, and I'll be very happy to keep tabs on that and moderate the discussion as well. So by way of introduction, let me share a quick intro with you, and then I'm going to ask our panelists to decide who wants to get us started and share your intros. From my end, I am an assistant professor of management at Rutgers Business School. I have been teaching for the school since 2014 and very, very excited to learn and include sustainability in my classes. I have been, since 2018, I have been leading my management skills students to participate in the Aim to Flourish project, in which students learn about businesses that are contributing towards sustainability through their products and services. And that has been a great, great experience that I'm very excited to have had with my students in terms of learning how business contributes to this. And so given my interest in careers, I thought that it would be great to have this session in the conference, and very, very happy to partner with you for that. So that's a little bit about me. Now, panelists who would like to get us started, please do share your intros. Tell us where are you right now doing your sustainability work? How did you get there? Lax, would you like to start? I see you speaking, but your line is muted.
Unmute my line. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. So let me tell you a bit about myself, right? So I work for Marsh and McLennan. I head up a team called Global Business Services. I've been with Marsh and McLennan for about 10 years, and my responsibilities are twofold. I'm the firm's chief procurement officer, where we facilitate the procurement of about $3 billion in global spend, and also head up our global corporate real estate portfolio, where we manage about 14 million square feet of real estate across 100 countries that houses about 80,000 of our colleagues. So my interest in sustainability really came through several years ago when we started seeing an increasing focus from both our clients and colleagues on what we were doing in regards to sustainability. when we were a large insurance broker, professional services firm, and we saw a lot of our clients asking for our positions on corporate social responsibility, sustainability, and documented goals. At the same time, we also saw an increasing amount of interest from our colleague base who wanted to understand what was our internal firm's position on sustainability. And from our perspective, what I've seen so far is what is good for the business can be oftentimes good for the environment as well. When we talk about a professional services firm in terms of how we use real estate, how we optimize the use of our space, how we reduce our energy consumption, both in our data centers as well as in our offices, how we sort of impact office supplies consumption. Our consumption of office supplies globally has dropped by about 40% over 5 years, right? So I think we've sort of combined both pragmatic business aspects along with sustainability to drive our purpose forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lax, and welcome.
Good to be here.
Who would like to share your intro next?
I'd be glad to go. My name is Eban Goodstein, and I'm director of the graduate programs in sustainability at Bard College. I'm an economist by training. To frame up kind of the careers conversation and the work I do, I tend to think of there being three broad avenues that one can go down if you want to sort of work in the change the future business. And we offer graduate degrees in all three of these spaces. So we have an MS degree in environmental policy and climate science and policy. And the students who pursue those policy degrees, they want to get jobs changing the rules. Right? They want to get rid of bad laws and regulations and put in place good laws and regulations to drive sustainable outcomes. And they're going to do that in government, obviously, but also increasingly in the private sector. So every big company now has got a chief sustainability officer, sustainability directors, and people with that title are really policy people. They're trying to drive change within organizations, change the rules within organizations to drive sustainable outcomes. A number of our grads also work kind of outside the system in nonprofits, where they're typically educating, advocating, and lobbying to change the rules in business or to change the rules in government. The second way to change the world, change the future, is education. So we have an MED in environmental education, and that's about changing minds, right? And this is critical. We need to engage a rising generation in the basic lessons of ecological literacy. Everything's connected to everything, made so apparent over the last year, where public health connected to the economy, connected to climate change. So it's evident, right? And that's really the work of folks who are pursuing graduate degrees in education. But that can also be just the conventional roles of teacher, professor, but also preacher, rabbi, artist, journalist. And then the third area is business. And if policy is about changing the rules and business is about changing minds, then, I'm sorry, let's get that back straight. Policy is about changing the rules, education is about changing minds, business is about changing the game, right? Because no matter how many rules we change, no matter how many minds we change, at the end of the day, business has got to figure out how to get this done, right? How we're going to keep the lights on, get food on our table, get our healthcare in ways that radically reduce environmental impact. 80, 90% reductions, not only in carbon emissions, but water pollution, toxic impacts, plastics, but also businesses that are treating workers and communities and suppliers with justice and with respect, because you can't have a company that's environmentally engaged without being also socially responsible. So those are, I think, a useful starting point for thinking about your careers or your students' careers. Do they want to change the rules? Do you want to change minds? Or do you want to change the game? And glad to talk more about those ideas as we move forward today.
And Eban, I'm curious, how did you get to this role?
Well, it's kind of a boring role, right? I mean, I started out trying not to be a college professor because that's in my genetic heritage. And I studied geology as an undergrad. Decided pretty quickly I wanted to be a college professor, became an economics teacher, did that for 20 years, and then got tired of teaching actually, and decided I wanted to do program development and build programs. So I was fortunate to be able to land at Bard to sort of scratch my more entrepreneurial itch. And I could talk about, I do have a bit of a background as a green entrepreneur, and I could talk about a business that I started at some point as well. And of course, it failed.
Okay.
But we could talk about that because that's a really important role, right, for businesses is not only the corporate avenue, but also the building of new visions and new models.
Okay, please do tell us about that as we go. And Michael, how about you? Welcome.
Sure, Carmen. Thank you for inviting me. Nice to meet you, Evan and Locke. I'll just talk a little bit about my journey. I've been with Johnson & Johnson for 30 years, which I still have a hard time believing. Right out of graduate school at Rutgers, and kind of had the privilege to grow up with a program that was not yet called Corporate Social Responsibility. It was a giving program, which was the case 30 years ago with most of the CSR programs that were evolving. And what I witnessed was, the credo, the 4 paragraphs that were written in 1946, which talked about stakeholders, including employees, obviously, customers, the community, and stakeholders or shareholders. So I watched this abstract document come to life. I was the second employee in our team. The team is now over 50 globally. And the journey was from giving to strategic philanthropy. And now we're calling ourselves Global Community Impact, which brings to play, a lot of other things besides money. It includes our supply chain, obviously human resources issues, talking about social impact investing now, which we never were before, talking a lot about global pro bono, where our employees are out in the communities kind of solving problems. So I'm less about sustainability, but I have managed I started our sustainability philanthropy portfolio, partnerships with some major organizations like the World Wildlife Fund and the Nature Conservancy. So, it has been an amazing journey to see, a Fortune 100 company kind of adopt and adapt to the changing environment. And I think the biggest message for me is, listening to those stakeholders in those 4 paragraphs really did shape our strategy.
Wonderful. Yeah, as I am listening to you and looking at you in the screen, I'm noticing the blue sky and the green fields behind you. So very, very appropriate for the sustainability topic. Thank you so much, Michael. I also noticed that you answered a question in the chat, and I do want to come back to that question a little bit later. We're going to dig deeper on that, Gerard. Thank you for your question. And so now I'd like to, we have seen Lax is coming from an insurance, one of the largest insurance brokers. Michael is coming from one of the largest pharmaceutical companies. And Eban, in this round of questions, would love to hear about your entrepreneurial experience. And so the question here now, Lax, I'm curious if you would share with us, based on your experience in financial services, what is the role of CSR and sustainability in this industry based on what you've seen?
Yes, so thank you, Carmen. Right, so I think, from our perspective, and our CEO, Dan Laser, said this publicly, right? When you look at the 2 largest risks that are facing us, the first is cybersecurity, and the second is climate change, right? When you look at CSR and sustainability, I think it's important that we behave as responsible citizens in a corporation with appropriate responsibility towards employees, suppliers, supporting the communities we work, and also generating value for our shareholders, right? So when you look at the shareholders, the stakeholders that we have, right? It's the board, the clients, the employees, and each constituent is asking for a position on CSR and sustainability, right? And quite frankly, I think the recent pandemic has, if at all, increased the amount of focus right now, right? in the way we live, how we work, the focus on sustainability, and actually we're seeing more interest in these topics than pre-pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Lax. How about you, Michael? What are your thoughts on coming from large pharma? What do you see the role of CSR and sustainability in the industry?
Well, I think you cannot not have an opinion. I think the Business Roundtable, I know that we might touch on that later, but that was a real call, I think, to action, a wake-up call that we finally have put Milton Friedman in the rearview mirror and are now looking out the windshield of what's facing us. And I think especially large companies with large employee bases, I think that the thing that has become most noticeable for me is employee activism. I think that employees are putting a lot of pressure on all of their CEOs to take a stand, whether it's Charlottesville or climate change, or pay gaps, you have to have an opinion, and your actions have to back your words. So I think that's probably been the biggest, aha moment in the last couple of years or in the last couple of months.
Thank you. And how about you, Eban? Tell us about that entrepreneurial experience and that you had. Tell us about the role of entrepreneurship and in CSR sustainability. Please unmute your line.
Yes, well, I'm glad to do that. I mean, I'm not a successful entrepreneur, except in the arena of education, but in our MBA program in sustainability, we have 3 verticals. The first is what we call sustainability vision, right? So how do you see opportunities where other people see social and environmental costs? The second vertical is leadership, right? So once you have that vision, how do you gather people around you to support that vision? And the third is just business execution, right? So you've got the people, you've got the vision, how do you just build a business out of that? Now, obviously, Lax and Michael have been doing that internally as intrapreneurs, right? They've been driving change within organizations. We absolutely need that. But the entrepreneurship skill set is just really critical because it really hones all 3 of those pieces, right? If you can be on a startup team as a young person, even if you're not leading it, you're very engaged with vision, you're very engaged with leadership, you're very engaged with all the fundamentals because you're not siloed. So it's an incredibly valuable opportunity if you can find a team to be on or latch on to, an idea of your own. Very briefly, the idea that I was kind of a bored college professor and worried about climate change in 1999, 2000. And I had a former student who was very entrepreneurial. And together we created the Race to Stop Global Warming. And this was going to be like a race for the cure. And we were going to have hundreds of thousands, millions of people running through streets across the world with Race to Stop Global Warming t-shirts on. And we had a good 4-year run. We started out in Portland, Oregon in 2000. By 2004, we were in 8 cities, including Central Park and the Presidio in Chicago, and great corporate sponsors with Toyota and Nike and others. But we never quite made money, right? So we were losing, 5 or 10%. And as we started to get big, that started to be like serious because, I had to cover the shortfall out of my college professor's salary, and it was getting to be. It was one of those moments, right, where I either had to go all in, I had to quit my job and say, this is what I'm going to do, and my partner did as well, and we made the decision to back off, and we always thought somebody else would pick it up because it was such a fabulous idea, but of course nobody has. So if there's any entrepreneurs out here, here's a ready-made business idea that is not hard to bootstrap. You could get it started for not much money, and I'd be glad to walk you through how we did it.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And for sure, through the projects that my students have worked on, the Aim to Flourish project that I mentioned earlier, we have definitely seen quite a number of companies that are doing work in this space, and it's very exciting to see the innovations, to see how they're contributing. Wonderful. And so Michael already alluded a little bit to this. Let's go a little bit deeper. And what I'm doing with these questions here is kind of like setting the stage, and we'll move into the career conversation. I just figured it wouldn't make sense, right, to go straight into the conversation without looking at the overall framework that is surrounding us. In August 2019, we had the Business Roundtable make very significant statements indicating in business we have 5 groups of stakeholders. And so this sounds, Michael, when you mentioned J&J's credo having 4 groups, not far from that, right? And so I'm curious, in your expertise in this field, gentlemen, what have you seen? What has been the impact a little over a year later now, close to 15 months later now? What impact have you seen in this space from that statement from the Business Roundtable? Who would like to start?
So let me take that comment up, Carmen. Right. So I think when you look at the philosophy behind the roundtable, right, it's about, as mentioned, delivering value to all stakeholders and not just to shareholders, right? Delivering value to customers, employees, suppliers who we pay $3 billion to on a yearly basis, supporting the communities in which we work, and of course, shareholders as well, right? And I think Eban referred to this, right? There's a tremendous amount of excitement and entrepreneurial spirit in our workforce. And I think, how do you tap that, right, to improve our operations internally within the firm as it relates to sustainability, as well as supporting the communities we serve? Increasingly, we see the younger generation, the colleagues that we hire into the firm, use our position in these areas as one of the deciding factors on trying to sign up with the firm or even retention with the firm. So I think it's absolutely important for us. And we've been focusing on this for a few years now.
And this links to the question that Gerard, you had made in the chat about what happens when there is no business case there. And Michael was saying to you, right, if there are stakeholders, there is a business case. Would you like to say more on that, Michael?
Yeah, I think, I like Gerard's follow-up comment there about putting the earth in the diagram. I do that in my class, actually. We have the earth as a stakeholder. So yeah, I think that, as I said before, the business of business is no longer the mantra that we're carrying around. I think the business of business is satisfying the needs of stakeholders and demonstrating value to all of our stakeholders. So I think, the conversation, has changed dramatically, and that, the business case can be, being an attractive company to some of the folks on this call that may be entering the job market. And you can readily find reputation rankings, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, all of those things that rank your company on how you're returning value to multiple stakeholders. So, I think if anything, it's really accelerated the need for companies to be more transparent about all of their data, all of their HR data, all of their environmental data, all of their, global impact data, and from a philanthropic and social investment perspective. So, yeah, I think, you can make the business case, multiple business cases to multiple stakeholders.
Not only human, huh? Eban, would you like to comment? I see you adding on the chat a report card.
Yeah, just put this out here. Just came out last month. Sort of an assessment of whether the Business Roundtable companies had really outperformed other companies in the last few years since the CEO signed on to the statement, and the answer was no. They haven't. Obviously, some of the business roundtable companies have done well, some have done not so well. So I think this just really speaks to the need for this audience to sort of hold them accountable, right? I don't think this is greenwashing. I think this is hard, right? And I think it's great that the companies have put a stake in the ground around stakeholder capitalism, and that, you know, at least intellectually, we're moving beyond sort of this belief in this magical belief in single bottom line business that's really running the planet and people into the ground. But what we really need are people who are trained how to do this, because it's easy to say, you know, that we're going to make money by doing well, but it's you know, it requires skill and it requires a different mindset. So just a quick plug for our MBA program. That's what we do, right? We're one of the few MBA programs in the world that is really fully integrating a focus on mission-driven business and sustainability into a core MBA. And so we're taking this seriously. We're saying, okay, if business says they're going to do this, what kind of education do future business leaders need? And we've been having that conversation the last few days here at the conference. So I think that you know, we can't just wave a magic wand and say we're going to figure this out. It's going to take time.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go into careers. I get the sense from our audience by the questions that are coming in, they're ready. And so starting with a high level question, what are some pathways into a career in sustainability or CSR? What are some pathways into a career in this space?
So Carmen, let me start with that, right? So I think from our perspective, there are three specific pathways, right? The first is being an internal sustainability CSR champion within the firm. And when you look at sustainability, it's about how can we help the firm reduce waste, reduce consumption, eliminate increase green energy usage. And that requires harnessing and you know, the speaker from J&J said, right? There are more than 100,000 employees globally. We have 80,000 employees globally. So just being a sustainability champion is definitely one area, one pathway. The second is business resiliency management, right? And understanding our firm's risk based on our global footprint. Firms like Johnson & Johnson, Marsh & McLennan, large financial firms who operate in 100 countries, right? At any given point, there are heat waves, storms, wildfires, earthquakes happening, right? And understanding the impact of climate and climate risk on your businesses, on the operations, where should it be located? How do you mitigate the risk? That's the second pathway, business resiliency management. And that's important, right? And the pandemic has shown that businesses have to be resilient. There's no option there. And the third pathway is around advising other firms on climate change, right? There's an absolute need. Firms are asking for advice on climate change and how to react to the different events that are happening. How do you advise firms on how to make their business models more resilient? So those are the three pathways that I would urge all the participants on this call to sort of look into.
Thank you. How about you, Michael? What thoughts do you have?
Yeah, well, you know, I forgot to mention that I do teach at Rutgers. So I talk to a lot of students that are interested in entering the CSR space. I teach in the School of Communications, not the business school, but I do talk to other business school students regularly. And, you know, it's a highly coveted job, you know, to be in CSR. But, you know, some companies are evolving a model where it's not a centralized function anymore. So, you know, I think to Locke's point, you know, it becomes everybody's job to be a CSR advocate in some ways. But from a practical perspective, I always urge employees that have a passion for this, especially if they're just entering Johnson & Johnson, you know, to, you know, put their hand up for the, you know, the pro bono opportunities, you know, get known, get exposure to senior leaders. And you can do this in a, you know, in an unconventional way by doing, you know, pro bono work, but also in functions like procurement, I mean, they have their own CSR practice and they don't call it that. So, you know, there are ways of entering any pathway within the company and getting close to the formal CSR while doing informal CSR. And you know, we've actually seen that as kind of a pipeline. When we do have job openings, we will always include the people that have been you know, close to us, volunteering, you know, doing stretch assignments, etc. And often they're the successful job candidate.
Michael, if Eban, if you don't mind, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper in something Michael said, because it links with a question from our audience. Heba in the audience is talking about I think Heba or someone and or someone else. I saw a comment here about how lean CSR functions are within companies, and you alluded to that, Michael. Would the two of you, Michael, Lax, would you like to comment further on this? Let me read you Heba's question. Where, based on your advice, should the sustainability group sit in a Fortune 500 company? I've seen it in some companies sit within environmental teams, and in others sit with the communications PR teams. And I saw someone else, yeah, speaking to how lean these teams are. Mike, I have found the sustainability team, impact teams are typically the most lean team in the entire organization. Do you see these teams growing and more opportunities arising? How can someone prepare to move into a role like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's hard to generalize because some companies are expanding and some companies are contracting. And my earlier point where CSR is kind of living everywhere, locally and globally, and less of a centralized function. But I follow, you know, the CSR job market, and I think it's never been as robust as it has been in the last 2 years. So companies are hiring, and maybe they're hiring for the first time CSR professionals. But you know, in our case, we have not contracted, and you know, continue to grow slowly. And to the earlier question of where should it live, that's another general. You know, you can't answer that in any blanket statement because it lives in so many different places. In our case, you know, we do report to global public affairs, but we are not the sustainability people. They're in environmental health and safety group. The place where we all come together is in reporting. You know, we do the social reporting where all of us have to kind of hold hands and be transparent about what we're doing. And that's kind of the meeting place. And that's become a new profession also within companies, the whole idea of reporting, especially on social metrics.
Right. And if I can just add, Carmen, to what Michael said, right? So I do agree with Michael where it can somewhat, there's no proper answer to where exactly it should report into. Sometimes it's a combination of environmental health and safety, business services, operations, compliance. And I do agree with Michael where it comes all together is from a reporting perspective, right? But what I would also urge all the participants is to consider, right? Sustainability definitely is more than just providing services within the firm, right? Increasingly, you see insurance firms who are underwriting big risks, right? Create complex analytical models around climate change, around business resiliency. So that's definitely an area where deep analytical thought is required. Secondly, around risk consulting, right? How do you partner with clients you serve to understand their risk better and to provide risk-based solutions, right? So I think apart from the internal focus, I think sustainability can also have a huge career when you look at risk consulting and risk advisory services as well.
Thank you. And Eban, coming back to you, in a previous answer, you had mentioned policy, education, and business. It sounded to me like those are some pathways to go into careers in this field. Would you like to add to that? And I would also like to add to that question, what competencies, skills do you see as being necessary for employees in this area? That question is coming from Chelsea in our audience.
Yeah, I think just seconding what Lox just said, I mean, I think a lot of people see sustainability as just being kind of internal operational efficiencies, right? But it's way more than that, right? I mean, from our perspective, what we're trying to do is transform society towards focused on shared well-being on a healthy planet. The business role here is obviously to get your internal house in order, but more significantly, it's to make sure that your business model is aligning with that task, right? So it's much more about the long-run strategy of the business than it is about, you know, changing the light bulbs, you know, on the factory floor, which is important too, right? So sort of to answer your question about, or let me answer the previous question a little bit. You know, most of our graduates coming out of our program on the business side are really just, they want to go support mission-driven companies, right? And they're going to do that as marketers or finance people or, you know, operations folks. And then they're going to bring the sustainability skill set to bear in that role, right? Very few of them are going to go join the sustainability team. Some do, but that's not the primary direction for most folks. So I think as we think about sustainability careers, it really is, does the company's values and mission align with me? Is this something I want to spend my life, you know, the next critical few decades, you know, helping build? And if so, how can I help drive that mission? And that might be internally or externally. And in terms of, you know, the broad skill set, I would say at the entry level, it's really, you know, some combination of those things I talked about, right? Vision, leadership, and execution. And, you know, broadly, that's what we're helping people acquire in graduate school. Different skill sets. I mean, the policy skill set is way more kind of research academic. You know, you got to really be able to do a good interdisciplinary literature review. Not so much on the business side, you know, where it's more about being able to, you know, concisely express your ideas in a 3-minute PowerPoint pitch, right? Those are kind of different skill sets, but it's all about, you know, effective, you know, visioning, communication, engagement, and then some hard skills. And the hard skills are really going to vary, and you can often pick those up on the job. You know, if you've got sort of the baseline education. Yeah.
Thank you, Eban. You know, as I'm listening to you, it comes up for me. Influence seems to be that it would be an important skill to have, right? And I see Michael nodding. And so Lax and Michael, I would love to hear from you in terms of skills and competencies that you believe are important in candidates for these roles. And Lax, also, since you are an MBA holder, would you tell us about how your MBA has contributed to your ability to further your career in this field?
Certainly. So you know, Carmen, to add to what Eban said, right? I think it's important to think about the education experience. Rutgers has a fantastic supply chain management program as well, as more of a generalist skill set, right? And I think increasingly going forward, firms are going to look at leadership from a generalist skill set perspective rather than a very specific siloed skill set, right? So, I mean, you may start off your career in sustainability, but 10 years down the line, you could be leading operations or leading a revenue-based business for the firm. So it's important to think broader as you look at your career lifetime, right? In terms of the skill sets that would be important, so I do agree. One is an analytical skill set, right? So quantifying the potential impact of our risk, right? Taking into account the potential impact of various scenarios, including black swan events, doing the financial modeling around that, and consultative skill sets, right? I used to be a consultant earlier on after business school, and you know, firm to understand the business, challenge the status quo in a respectful manner, change management, and communications. Right? So those are skill sets from my perspective, dealing with ambiguity, willing to learn and adapt. And even though you may sort of start off in sustainability, it's very important to understand how does your firm make money and how can you align your goals to business goals.
Okay. Hmm. I have stopped hearing Lax.
Yeah, Lax, your
Yeah,
microphone, your headset, or whatever is not.
Yeah, there were a few seconds.
Yeah.
What you just said last, I just maybe 5-6 seconds I missed it.
Can you hear me now, Carmen?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I apologies. I'm not sure what's going on with my wireless connection here, right?
No worries.
But what the MBA program I did mine from NYU has been incredibly useful to me from a perspective of understanding the analytics behind financial statements, income statements, balance, cash flow statements, understanding business models, challenging the status quo in a respectful manner, and just having that consultative skill set that was provided to me by my MBA experience was very helpful to me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. And how about you, Michael? What are your thoughts on skill sets that are very valuable in this career?
Yeah, well, I have two answers. I love what Evan and Locke said, and totally agree. But I think the thing that I've seen as a derailer more often than not, and everybody comes in, with all of the skills that my colleagues outline, and the lack of emotional intelligence, takes them right off the tracks. So, especially in the social impact space, and I'm pretty sure it applies to the sustainability space. I mean, just having those kind of basic empathy skills, talking to the community is different than, talking, to your business colleagues. So, again, I've seen brilliant people go off the tracks with that kind of basic lack of emotional intelligence. But from the skill perspective, I was just reading the World Economic Forum, and I'll put the link in the chat later, published Future Skills, a report recently, the emerging skills that are necessary for success in the next decade. And not surprisingly, analytical thinker is number one, and active learning is number two, complex problem solving is number three, critical thinking and analytics is four, and then five, which is interesting and I think related to COVID, is resilience and stress tolerance and flexibility. So the report's amazing. They break it down by country as well as by occupation. So again, I'll put it out there, and I think you'll enjoy reading it.
Thank you. And so I have a question from Owen. For new graduates, how did you advise approaching the job search and job market? What did you wish you knew then when starting out? Who would like to?
Well, I can go, Carmen, if that's okay, right? So I think, the second part is quite interesting, right? Is what did I wish I knew when I was starting out, right? I think the first thing is it's all going to work out, right? And when you look at just sort of your long-term career from the next 25, 30 years, right? Again, having that flexible mindset, right? And to what Michael said, having that emotional intelligence, understanding your stakeholders' priorities, and just being open to various types of opportunities, whether it's sustainability within the firm, whether it's take a part of a big consulting organization in their risk consulting team, whether it's advising a large underwriter from an analytical, from a modeling, catastrophe modeling perspective, just being open-minded on the different career paths around sustainability and supply chain would be quite useful.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you for that. And I'd like to mention in just a few conversations that I have had with professionals in the field, some of these professionals mentioned to me that sometimes the job opportunities for graduates with a bachelor degree, a bachelor degree holder, there may be there may be less opportunities out there, that some of these jobs require more graduate degrees. So I would like to add that to the question. Does that link with your experience? And again, how do you advise approaching the job search and job market? Evan?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for folks who really are looking for a job, I'm going to be doing a webinar on the 11th of November on how to get a job in sustainability. So I'll give you a whole hour of kind of my thoughts about specifically how to look for work in the space. So I put a link to that in the chat. I'll do it again in a minute. But I would say, and sort of responding to your first question, what do I wish I'd known? I wish I'd known how to do this, right? Because it's not something that is laid out for people very effectively. And I'm working with both our policy and MBA grads regularly on sort of job searches. And the basic recommendation is figure out the place you want to live, what city or town you want to live in, and then find the 10 companies you want to work for. And you can do this in a few hours of work on Google, find the companies that are doing really good work, figure out who works there, kind of at a mid-level management range, folks that you'd like to be working for, and then figure out a way to talk to them. Send them a note on LinkedIn, say I'm a recent graduate from here or there, and I'd love to, talk with you about your work and learn more about this space, or I think the work you're doing is so interesting. Could we talk about it? Or, take it further than that and blog about it or podcast about it. But basically getting conversation with the folks who are in the companies that you want to work for. And those are the ways you're going to find jobs, as opposed to sustainability jobs in particular, or mission driven or, purpose type positions, as opposed to the, oh, here's one that's posted on a website somewhere and I'll send in my resume and I'll be one of 700 people, right? That sounds like work, but it's the best kind of, it's absolutely the best way to learn about the work you want to do, meet the people you need to meet. Just, you're a student, and most people love talking to students, frankly. They like the break from the work they're doing, and they like to engage and mentor. So that's what I would really strongly recommend. And I don't think, you can definitely get entry-level work with a BS or a BA. If you want to pursue this as a career in the leadership space, then you're going to be looking at a graduate degree, I think. And that might be right away if you want to make a big difference in your 20s, and you're ready for that, but it also might be in 5 or 6 years.
Okay, thank you.
That was great advice, Evan. Couldn't have said it better. And I'll just put a little underscore under the social media. What an advantage that I never had when I was seeking jobs. With LinkedIn and Twitter, there are 2 people on Twitter that post about 2 or 3 jobs a day in CSR and sustainability, and they're real jobs. And these people, are credible influencers within that space. So, and talking to people in the company is you got to know someone that works at one of these companies. And as Evan said, I'm always willing to talk to somebody, and I do it probably once or twice a week.
Fantastic. Good. And so here's a question in the chat from William. William is addressing the question to you, Lax. William says, I agree there are jobs in risk management roles. That said, do you see risk as a financial issue, or do you see risk as existential human life issues? And he said, do you or Marsh see risk as existential human life issues? Biodiversity, climate, ocean decline are existential risks. Understanding thresholds and resource flows seems core to bridging this paradox. Lax, please unmute your line.
Sorry, Carmen, right? So I think, it's it's a bit of both. So clearly, I think it is a financial issue, right? When you look at it from an insurance perspective, right? Before insurance firms underwrite, and we're not an underwriter, right? Underwrite large property and casualty risks. They would want to know where your operations are. What have you done to mitigate the risks? What's your business resiliency management philosophy? How have you sort of diversified your operations base? And our business resiliency management team actively takes part in the internal operations discussions, right? Firms in Johnson, Marsh, and other firms, right? We're all thinking about this actively and on a daily basis, right? So clearly this is a financial risk, financial impact, and trying to model if event A happens, what's your financial risk scenario, right? From an existential risk perspective, right, that's a broader question to answer. As I said earlier, right, cybersecurity and climate change are the two biggest risks that the world is facing. We're going to have to change quite rapidly in the way we live, the way we share information, the way we travel, our impact on the environment to deal with these risks. So clearly, it's a very, very serious risk that the world is facing right now and will continue to face for the next several decades.
Thank you. Thank you. And so a question that is coming to mind is, so I heard from Michael how he mentioned that at J&J he has seen the groups continue to grow slowly. Lax, Eban, what are your thoughts in terms of what are the trends we are seeing in terms of jobs in this space?
Well, just quickly on that point, again, I think it's important to broaden your view of what you think of as a sustainability job. The number of jobs with that CSR, sustainability, the title grows slowly by definition, but the number of jobs within companies that have a very explicit social or environmental mission is growing very rapidly, as we've seen with the Business Roundtable sort of turnaround. So I think that there's what you have to do as a sustainability person, is to take that skill set wherever you are and just drive it as far as you can within whatever business context you're in. So I think the opportunities are just, mushrooming. Businesses seek to figure out how to build, a mission-driven focus. I would add specifically that, after next Tuesday, or maybe a week after next Tuesday, we're going to get a lot of clarity about job growth in the government sector. So I think for over the next year, we could see an explosion in employment around green recovery, right? Again, depending upon the outcome of, there haven't been many jobs, in the federal world for the last 4 years, but I think that space could really grow fast. And some of that will come down to state and local too, right? If there's a big sort of increase in support for state and local governments, and obviously lots of work that has to be done in the context of a green recovery. So, I think that's really a space to watch, depending upon the outcome of the elections. In addition to what's happening in the private sector, and then of course, a lot of that money winds up, in the form of sort of consulting contracts as well. So ICF, Booz Allen, those companies are the ones who actually have to implement a bunch of the stuff that the feds are going to mandate. So the whole green recovery world, I think, is going to be really exciting and a lot of opportunity in the next 2 years, again, depending upon what happens next week.
Thank you. How about you, Lax? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think just to add to what Eban said, right, I think it's important to align yourself with a firm where you believe in the mission, purpose, where you would see yourself working for the next few years. And then think about the sustainability role a bit more broadly, right? So definitely it can have a CSR perspective, but it can also have a business resiliency management perspective. It can also have a perspective of advising the firm's clients on risk consulting, risk mitigation, different types of risk advisory services. So I would just encourage everyone to think about sustainability as a broader portfolio of jobs.
Thank you. As I was listening to your answers, I was linking it with William's comment a little while ago in the chat. He talks about how to embed the sustainability understanding as a way of being in all jobs. That definitely sounds ideal and expansive to me. Fantastic. So we have a question from Ria. I think I recognize Ria's name here. As an undergraduate student, how do you advise incorporating sustainability into a career, such as financial operations that is not directly related to the sustainability initiative? So I think you just spoke to that, Lax. Would you like to add?
Yes, so that's correct, Ria. So thank you for your question and to my earlier comment, right? I think financial operations, financial modeling, quantifying the impact of the risk is definitely part of sustainability in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And Chelsea also has a question for you, Lax. Any insight into supplier audits? Chelsea wonders, is this a professional potential area?
So Chelsea, thank you for your question, right? So I think you're asking about conducting audits with suppliers, right? So as a professional services firm, our spend is mostly indirect, right? So it's information technology, travel, business operations, and other areas of spend, right? But clearly from a manufacturing.
Mm. We lost you there, Lax. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Can't hear you yet. Okay. Would you like to post in the chat? We can't, the audio is gone for you. I'm sorry. It sounds like it must be a connection issue.
Yeah.
Okay, here. Okay, you're back. Yeah, Gerard, to your comment, Eban's comment before about the business roundtable, I think it goes in the same direction you're going, that we haven't seen really that much progress. And take a look at the New York Times link that Eban posted earlier if you haven't yet. Okay, good. So we have reached the end of our hour. Thank you so much to our panelists and participants. What a great conversation. Very happy to be able to connect on these topics. They're so relevant right now, right? This topic is just feels so relevant, and I'm so thankful for your sharing these your views on this and sharing the advice with our participants today. Participants, thank you so much for your active engagement here in the chat. Please, everybody, complete the end of session poll on the Entergy app for this session, and I'm going to post the link really quick here. Please, thank you everybody so much.